You've stressed over your grocery bill lately, and you are not alone. A new poll revealing that most Americans are worried about paying for food at the store.
Used to be you go in with $30, you could buy a week's groceries.
A lot of us are on a fixed income, and we can't afford the higher cost of everything.
Believe it or not, even a carton of eggs is turning into a luxury item in several U.S. states. In Mississippi, a family of 4 is having to choose between buying meat or milk. In Texas, some are skipping meals just to save enough for canned goods in case prices keep climbing. Just 1 week after the Trump administration's new tariffs took effect, America's food market was thrown into chaos. A wave of imported goods got hit with steeper taxes, sending domestic prices soaring. And once again, it's everyday consumers who are bearing the brunt. This isn't just inflation anymore. This is a full-blown food crisis, pushing at least 10 states into red alert status. People can't stop eating. But they also can't afford to keep paying for meals like this. Is your state on the list? And if it is, what happens in the next 30 days? Number 1, Texas. If you've ever grocery shopped in Texas, you probably remember the days when $25 could get you ground beef, fresh greens, a carton of eggs, and a few cans of soup for the pantry. But this August, shoppers in Houston, El Paso, and San Antonio are saying the same thing. $80 now barely covers a decent dinner for a family of 4. At H-E-B, a basic pack of ground beef that used to cost $4.89 per pound is now up to $7.25. Fresh chicken breast. Once the go-to lifesaver for end-of-the-month meals, is now $5.98 a pound, up nearly 40% from just last month. A gallon of milk at Kroger, which held steady at $3.29 for years, has now shot past $5.10. All in the average price of a grocery basket with 8 basic items: meat, eggs, vegetables, milk, bread, pasta, canned beans, and fruit. Has jumped from $46.20 to $73.45 in less than 2 weeks. And the reason? Tariffs just imposed by the Trump administration on imports from Mexico and Canada. Texas, which heavily relies on cross-border supply chains, is now facing a double blow: higher import costs and not enough domestic supply to make up the gap. Packaged vegetables from Canada are now taxed at 18%. Frozen meat from Mexico, which supplies over 40% of affordable restaurants across the state, has seen average price increases of 32%. The result? Locals who once bought meat in bulk to freeze and portion out are now thinking twice about every slice they put in the cart. To make matters worse, a shortage of migrant labor has sent operating costs for South Texas farms through the roof. A box of locally grown strawberries that once sold for $2.50 now goes for $4.79. Simply because there aren't enough workers to harvest the fruit. Texans are used to abundance at the dinner table, but now abundance is being replaced by calculation. Every trip to the grocery store starts not with checking quality, but scanning the unit price. And more people are choosing to pull back, buying less, eating less, sacrificing nutrition just to get through the week. If you've ever thought a little bump in meat prices isn't a big deal, try standing inside a San Antonio supermarket at 6 p.m. Watching shoppers quietly take items out of their carts because they've gone over budget. That's when you realize it's not about a few extra dollars. It's about the helplessness of watching dinner itself become a luxury. Number 2, Mississippi. In rural Mississippi, moms skipping breakfast so their kids can eat is nothing new. But this August, it's no longer a personal choice. It's becoming a way of life. According to the latest data from Feeding America, Mississippi now has the highest rate of food insecurity in the country, with over 22% of residents uncertain where their next meal will come from. And with the Trump administration's new tariffs kicking in, this crisis isn't just hitting the poor. It's reaching working families with steady jobs. At a small grocery store near Jackson, the cheapest loaf of sandwich bread jumped from $1.09 to $1.78. A can of beans went from 89 cents to $1.39. Baby formula, once a go-to money-saving option for many households, has seen price hikes of over 70% in just 10 days. No big supermarkets, no cheaper alternatives. That's the reality across many counties in the Mississippi Delta. And without options, everyday shoppers become unwilling victims of a broken supply chain. At a small store in Clarksdale, the rice aisle used to offer 5 imported brands from Asia. Now there's only one. The reason isn't a shortage. It's a 35% import tax on rice from Vietnam and India that's made the price too high for most families to afford. The store owner can't stock items that don't sell, and customers can't buy in bulk like they used to. Unlike Texas, Mississippi doesn't have large-scale agriculture or major retail chains to offset the damage. The state relies on subsidies, donations, and grassroots support systems. But when food prices across the board rise due to trade policies, even charity runs dry. Many local nonprofits say they're receiving fewer donations from suppliers, or having to spend nearly twice as much to purchase the same amount of food. No one expects a struggling family in Mississippi to understand the nuances of global trade policy, but they absolutely feel the fallout every time they open an empty fridge. What do you think when you hear that some Americans are going hungry? Not because they're unemployed, but because of a policy passed in the name of protecting the national economy. And are you certain your own neighborhood won't be next? Number 3, Louisiana. Nowhere in America is food more deeply tied to local culture than in Louisiana. From gumbo to jambalaya, fried catfish to spicy smoked meats. Meals here aren't just sustenance, they're identity. But this August, people in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and along the coast are asking a painful question. Can we still cook our traditional dishes if we can't afford the ingredients? At the Lafayette Farmers Market, a pound of locally sourced catfish now goes for over $8.50, while imported Vietnamese catfish, hit with a 40% tariff, has jumped to $9.99 a pound, the highest price in 5 years. Mid-sized frozen shrimp that used to cost $5.20 a pound are now listed at $8.60. Even a packet of Cajun seasoning. The soul of many Louisiana dishes has risen from $1.29 to $2.49 due, in part to ingredients imported from Southeast Asia and Central America. Louisiana has one of the highest percentages of food service workers in the country. Yet ironically, many of the same people who prepare and serve food for a living are now struggling to feed themselves with the very meals they make every day. According to data from the LSU Agricultural Center, food prices in the Bayou region have surged more than 26% in just the past 3 weeks, with seafood, spices, and processed staples hit hardest. And it's not just imported food facing higher costs. Local fishermen are getting squeezed from both sides. Fuel taxes have driven up the cost of running fishing boats by over 20%, and disruptions in the supply of refrigerated trucks have made domestic transport more expensive. The result? The humble seafood platter. Once considered poor folks' food has become a weekend-only treat, if not a once-a-month indulgence. Louisianans are not easily shaken. They've weathered Katrina, survived countless storms. But what they can't fight off are tax policies written 1,000 miles away, policies that hit home in the form of pricier rice, scarcer shrimp, and empty spice racks. If you're from Louisiana, when was the last time you made a pot of gumbo? And if shrimp prices double and seasoning runs dry, will that dish still feel like part of your everyday life? Or just a memory? Number 4, Arkansas. When a state is home to Walmart, people assume food prices there will always be more affordable than elsewhere. But if you ask folks in Fort Smith or Pine Bluff this August, they'll tell you the opposite. Prices have gotten so high they can barely breathe. A regular carton of eggs at Walmart in Little Rock used to cost $2.18. Now it's up to $3.89. A whole chicken from a local supplier has jumped from $6.99 to $10.40 each. Even a 5-pound bag of potatoes, once considered dirt cheap, has shot up from $2.50 to $4.30 in just 10 days. For families earning under $35,000 a year, who make up nearly 37% of the state, these hikes mean cutting out at least 2 items every time they shop for groceries. Here's the issue. Arkansas isn't just a place where people buy food. It's the logistical backbone of the American retail industry. Warehouses for Walmart, Tyson Foods, and J.B. Hunt have long played a key role in keeping shelves stocked across the country. But with new tariffs hitting meat, seafood, and key raw materials, even these giants are facing ballooning operating costs. And the ripple effect? Local prices, once the lowest in the nation, are now feeling the heat of inflation just like everywhere else. Tyson, the largest chicken producer in America, has raised the average price of its frozen products by 12 to 18% in Arkansas. Smaller retailers can't keep up, forcing many communities into single-channel shopping. Residents have no choice but to buy from one store at whatever price is offered. How are people feeling? Not with explosive outrage, but with a slow, simmering frustration. The kind that comes from realizing that living in the backyard of the American food industry no longer shields you from hardship. Used to think Arkansas was where food would always be cheap. Next time you head to the store and leave that carton of eggs behind because your budget won't stretch, ask yourself, who's really deciding the price of your grocery cart? Number 5, Kentucky. For decades, people in Kentucky, especially in the heartland and the Appalachian Mountains, have taken pride in their self-sufficiency when it comes to food. A few chickens in the yard, a patch of vegetables out back, fishing in the nearby rivers and lakes. It wasn't just a routine, it was a way of life. But in August 2025, even the most self-reliant communities are starting to feel the sharp edge of the food crisis closing in. In a small town near Bowling Green, one resident says the cost of ingredients for a weekend BBQ, a beloved local tradition, has nearly doubled. A rack of pork ribs that once cost $11.49 is now tagged at $18.30. Charcoal made from local timber isn't cheap anymore, either thanks to rising transportation and packaging costs. The issue isn't just about prices going up, it's about the complete lack of alternatives. With few large supermarkets nearby, most rural Kentuckians rely on convenience stores or mid-tier grocers like Save-A-Lot and Food Giant, places that don't have the bargaining power of the bigger chains. And when new tariffs squeeze the supply chain, these smaller retailers and their customers are the first to get hit. On top of that, Kentucky has one of the highest percentages of older adults living independently in the country. With fixed monthly incomes, many seniors now face an impossible choice: food or medication. A box of breakfast cereal has jumped from $2.79 to $4.25. A bag of spaghetti, once stretched across 3 meals, now costs over $3. And perhaps most troubling of all, no one saw this coming. Unlike storms, floods, or deep freezes, there were no emergency alerts for this price storm, no sirens, no shelters, just emptier shelves, longer receipts, and puzzled looks as people step out of the store wondering how it all happened. Kentuckians used to believe as long as we've got land strength and a few animals to raise, we'll never go hungry. But did anyone really see this coming? A world where the entire national food supply could shift because of a few lines of tariff policy from Washington. So ask yourself what happens when even your backyard, the symbol of your independence, can no longer keep hunger at bay. Number 6, West Virginia. West Virginia has long carried the label of the forgotten land, not because its people lack determination, but because the system has all but abandoned them. And in August 2025, that truth is clearer than ever, as food prices skyrocket by the day, leaving residents with just one option: cut back on meals. In the Martinsburg area, a single supermarket serves 3 nearby towns, and it can no longer maintain the prices locals once depended on. A gallon of whole milk has climbed from $3.15 to $5.89. The cheapest sandwich bread, once $1.25, now sells for $2.49. And frozen food, which many rely on when daily cooking isn't possible, has surged as much as 60% in just the past 10 days. There's no Walmart or Costco nearby. People here depend on small regional chains or family-owned stores. And as new tariffs push the cost of imports higher, major distributors are slashing shipments to low-profit regions like West Virginia first. That's why in places like Beckley, many families report going an entire week without buying a single pound of fresh meat. Not because they couldn't afford it, but because the stores didn't have any to sell. The result, locals are reverting to old-school survival mode, stocking up on canned beans, instant noodles, frozen sausages, at prices that are no longer budget-friendly. The irony is painful. West Virginia didn't cause this crisis yet. It's one of the first to feel the blow. They don't manufacture imported goods. They don't represent a powerful voting bloc on trade policy. But when America's food system is shaken by decisions from Washington, the people in Appalachia are the ones who fall first, because they were already closest to the bottom. Have you ever stopped to think about this, that a political decision signed thousands of miles away could lead to a family in West Virginia cutting their daily meals in half, just to make the groceries last another week? If this isn't injustice, then what is? Number 7, New Mexico. In southern New Mexico, people used to joke, when the sun rises, gas prices go up. When it sets, food prices jump. But in August 2025, that joke no longer gets a laugh, because even a cheap bottle of cooking oil has become a luxury for many families. In Albuquerque, a 1.8-liter bottle of vegetable oil has surged from $3.89 to $6.45 in just 2 weeks. A pack of 10 tortillas, once a cheap and beloved Latin staple, is now $4.20, over 70% higher than just a month ago. Tomatoes, bell peppers, red onions, the basics of local cuisine, have all been hit by tariffs on imports from Mexico and Central America. In Latino-heavy neighborhoods, the average price for a pound of fresh vegetables has jumped from $1.30 to over $2.70. With more than 48% of the population being Latino, many working in agriculture, construction, and service jobs, New Mexico ranks among the states with the lowest household incomes in the country. food isn't just a necessity here, it's the single largest monthly expense. So when that category jumps over 30% after a single round of tariffs, household budgets tip straight into crisis mode. At a supermarket in Las Cruces, staff reported that putbacks, items customers place in their cart but abandon before checkout, doubled during the second week of August. People still want to buy, but once they see the final bill, they realize they simply can't afford it. Even staple items that used to be a fallback, instant noodles, rice-dried beans, are now pricier across the board as supply chains are squeezed by rising import and transportation costs. New Mexico isn't a financial hub. It's not a political capital. It doesn't carry much weight in Washington. But its residents are paying the same price as those in major states, without the safety net subsidies or retail networks to shield them. Have you ever stopped to wonder when a family in New Mexico skips lunch just to afford another gallon of water? Where is the American dream they once believed in? And if the government keeps layering on new tariffs, who's next in line to choose between eating and surviving? Number 8, Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, agriculture isn't just a livelihood, it's part of the state's identity. Wide open land, a sparse population, and high productivity made folks here believe that America First policies would give domestic farmers a competitive edge. But in August 2025, that belief is being put to the test. Right on the shelves of local supermarkets and farmers markets. In Tulsa, the price of a pound of ground beef, once the go-to source of protein, has shot up from $3.99 to $7.20 in less than 2 weeks. Even products made from beans, long considered a staple of Oklahoma's plains, have jumped over 40% as logistics chains reel from tariffs on imported soybeans, additives, and processing materials from Canada and Brazil. Families who once proudly said we eat local to support American farmers are now asking a hard question: where is local food when prices are no longer within reach? Supply chains that rely on imported inputs from Mexico and Central America are crumbling under retaliatory tariffs. And while Oklahoma farmers may not export directly, they're still caught in the fallout. Facing shrinking markets, surplus supplies, and rising production costs. In the suburbs of Oklahoma City, a mid-sized grocery chain reported a 30% increase in price checkers. Shoppers who come in, look at the prices, and walk out empty-handed. It's a clear sign that uncertainty and helplessness are spreading throughout the community. People don't know how to respond. Because they have so few options, not enough big retailers to shop around, not enough food aid coming in fast enough, and not enough political clout to force change. Here's the paradox. Oklahomans once supported protectionist policies because they believed it would make American goods more competitive. But when consumers can no longer afford those goods, and farmers are bleeding money from skyrocketing costs, who exactly is being protected? If you ever believed that Americans should eat American food, ask yourself this. When was the last time you had a full meal made from local products, at a price your family could actually afford? Number 9, Ohio. In Dayton, Columbus, and Akron, cities once seen as icons of America's working class. Grocery shopping is becoming an increasingly stressful experience, not because shelves are empty, but because receipts are growing longer than the cash in people's wallets. Ohio has long been considered the ideal middle state. Not too poor, not too wealthy, rarely hit by major natural disasters. And maybe that's why people here became used to a balanced lifestyle where food was always accessible. Something you could buy without second-guessing every dollar. That's no longer the case. A box of Kroger brand cereal that used to cost $2.89 now goes for over $5. A gallon of whole milk has jumped from $3.60 to $6.10. Even hot dogs, a beloved Ohio staple, have gone up nearly 70% thanks to heavy tariffs on pork imports from Canada and Mexico. The budget-friendly supply chains that served Ohio's cities are being squeezed, not because of product shortages, but because distributors can no longer keep prices down in the face of repeated tariff hits. What sets Ohio apart is the deep-rooted belief that city life means more opportunities and fewer risks than rural areas. But that belief is cracking, because it's urban working communities that are getting hit first. Seniors on fixed incomes can't afford basic staples like rice. Factory workers are cutting back on meals just to keep up with gas money to get to work. Columbus was once hailed as one of the most price-stable cities in America, but according to the latest reports, food costs here have surged nearly 27% in just the past 3 weeks. The highest spike in the Midwest. No warning, no emergency subsidies, no federal guidance on how to respond, just families left to face the same question every night. What are we eating today, if anything? If Ohio, long called America's consumer baseline, can't withstand today's food prices, how many other states are quietly sinking beneath the surface? Number 10, Alabama. In Alabama, most people aren't chasing lavish dinners. They just want enough to eat. Something filling, affordable, and simple. But in August 2025, even that modest hope is slipping away for millions of families, especially in the rural South. According to the latest data, Alabama ranks among the bottom 5 U.S. states for household income. And it's these low-income families who are being hit the hardest by the domino effect of rising food prices sweeping across the country. In Huntsville, a 10-pound bag of rice that once sold for $6.99 now costs $11.40. Red beans and canned corn, staples of Southern meals, have nearly doubled in price in just 2 weeks. Even peanut butter, Alabama's beloved pantry essential, has passed the $7 mark for some jars. The problem isn't just prices. It's also the rigid supply chain many Alabama communities are stuck in. Most people rely on smaller chains like Piggly Wiggly, Save-A-Lot, and Dollar General. Retailers that don't have the negotiating power to keep costs down as tariffs drive up import expenses. In Montgomery, convenience stores report that more customers are swapping meals, trading rice for instant noodles, fresh meat for frozen hot dogs, because that's all they can afford. But even hot dogs, once considered the poor man's protein, are slipping out of reach. A 12-pack that used to cost $2.50 now goes for $4.20. A working dad in Mobile put it simply, "I don't need anything fancy. I just need to know that at the end of the day, my kid has something to eat." Now even that modest certainty is beginning to crack. Washington's new tariff policy was supposed to bring manufacturing back to America. But when people in Alabama can no longer afford American meat, American beans, or American vegetables, who's really benefiting? And if daily meals are becoming a luxury for the most frugal Americans, what happens to our sense of national pride? The food crisis we're seeing now isn't a short-term shock. It's the result of policy decisions made behind closed doors in Washington. Yet it's showing up on the dinner tables of everyday families in Texas, Ohio, Mississippi, and across America. Tariffs were introduced in the name of protecting American goods, but it's American consumers who are taking the first and hardest hit. Not because they don't want to support local products, but because prices have climbed beyond what they can afford. And here's the cold truth: they can't bargain with the supermarket. They can't debate the checkout total. If this trend continues, will food insecurity become the new normal? And if hardworking, budget-conscious Americans can no longer provide a full meal for their families, what happens to the American dream?
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.